So Daniel, takes whatever, 5 hours to fly back to Washington, 90 minutes to get to Olympia. They know where you live. You heard the pitch from Greater Seattle. What's your response as a potential investor at the State Department of Commerce?
Yeah, we're excited about it. It turns out it's very aligned with some work that we were doing really in parallel. So our state has had a variety of energy policies, but about 12 months ago we started looking at, well, how does that connect to our economic development policy? We looked at the things we've done with like renewable portfolio standards or renewable fuel standards. They actually haven't been driving that much economic development within our states. We were importing biofuels from other parts of the country. And so we looked at that, then combined with the fiscal realities, and we said, hey, what's our approach towards clean tech? And we really settled on this notion of looking at what are the industries within the state of Washington where we are on the bubble of having a globally competitive advantage. And did that very deliberately across our entire geography. And it just so happens that one of the three areas is exactly this area of green buildings, and particularly how do you apply IT within green buildings, and also how do they connect to the grid. What we like about that is that you're not in a battle where you're trying to race to the bottom in terms of who can throw the biggest subsidy at some highly mobile company, but you're really building on state strengths, but there's some compelling reason for the public sector to be involved. We've again Eric did a nice job of kind of highlighting some of the successful companies, and they were not all spurred on by public-private partnerships. Some of them just happened because of some of our natural assets, but our great universities, our quality of life. But I think there is a particular opportunity here in this space where we say, because of the nature of the customer, which is both building owners and utilities, who actually are kind of a key partner in that it really does make sense to try to aggregate that demand and really push those technologies forward. So we were excited. I think in spite of a very challenging budget environment, they're still within our state budget, and it hasn't passed yet, but there is a small amount of money that's circled to really help spur this initiative that would be contingent on match from both other public and private partners. So we're excited and feel like it's very well aligned with our state strategy.
That's right. Mr. Mayor, we heard a bit of this conversation with the mayors of Minneapolis and St. Paul, because the norm in so many parts of our country is literally for municipalities to steal businesses from each other for a subsidy, as opposed to come together around a regional economic development strategy. So how is this happening? Have you suspended sort of the political marketplace for some period of time?
Well, I think that, first of all, for all of us in public corporations, we call cities or counties, state government for that matter, this has really been a significant transition for us through this economic downturn. I would tell you that in the past, we've gone through these cycles. They normally last 24 or 48 months. Building starts, the economy begins to get better, and we all take credit for it, but the fact of the matter is it happened through a normal cycle. We have gone through a focus of really dealing with less revenue. We have had to make really tough choices in our cities and in our counties and in our state. And the fact of the matter is we cannot save our way to prosperity. Cities, counties, states will not prosper, will not exist, will not be successful if they're not a strong economic engine. And that is a fact of life that I think if we didn't believe it before, we absolutely know and believe it now. That's why this effort, I think, is so important to us. The other thing I would say, well, the mayor said it before, we will compete for our own cities, but the reality is if my county is successful, if my region is successful, if my state is successful, my city will be successful. And I think that we've really had to change our thinking about this, Bruce and others, and it's really been sort of a transformable effort for all of us to think differently. And the fact is, our businesses will rate us and grade us and determine our success or failure based on our performance, as well as our citizens. And I think to the question, does it transition political leadership of the time? And I think it absolutely will, because I think our public and our businesses today expect more of future leaders, and they will elect leaders who really understand that paradigm.
So what you're describing, emerging, obviously, a work in progress, is a culture of collaboration across jurisdictional lines. And Kim, you're here from Microsoft. It's hard to imagine we would have this business plan if Microsoft was not present in greater Seattle. But how do you think about the culture of collaboration across the public and private sectors? Does this plan resonate with you?
Well, I like to think the plan would be there, regardless, because there's lots of other creative things going on across the country. But certainly, when we look at a company like Microsoft, great companies have great philanthropic efforts and are involved in public-private partnerships. And certainly Microsoft is no example. I mean, when you think of efforts like this one, it's probably one of the first that comes to mind. On the other hand, let me address it from a slightly different perspective, because I think it's important. Everybody thinks of Microsoft and our philanthropic efforts, but talk to you a little bit about what we're doing sort of from a business perspective. There are hundreds of us at Microsoft that work solely with government entities, federal level, state level, local level. And I'm one of them. I spent 18 years in government, and now with Microsoft, I spent time in state government, time in federal government. And one of the things we try to do is really help bring the power of technology to solve big government problems. Not just software on your desktop or software in the cloud as it is today, but the big government problems. And what's appealing about a project like this one, Eric touched on it when he said, data really is at the heart of many of these problems we're trying to solve. Whether it's the core because we're trying to be innovative, right, and develop new industries and businesses that are in the technology space, or whether it's simply just having good information. My background is in the environmental space, so a project like this is one that I particularly love. I spent 18 years in environmental agencies. But here's sort of, I think, a key example of why a company like Microsoft would be interested in a project like this. About a year and a half ago, the UN came out with a report called the 2020 report, Smart 2020 report. And in there, it was actually developed by a lot of ICT companies, communications and technology companies, where we were looking at what's the impact we were having on the environmental footprint and an energy consumption. And we probably had about 2% impact in the environmental space. Obviously, with all the growing data centers and everything, we have to reduce that. But what was really profound was when you look at the other sectors, whether the manufacturing sector or building management sector, or just sort of standard business processes or energy grid, the application of information technology to those other sectors can actually help those other sectors reduce their environmental emissions, their carbon emissions, their environmental footprint by over 30%. So that's the power of a company like Microsoft working with a project like this one, where we bring information technology and information to the core of the problem to help address that problem.